with the batteries, and you can stay in the air. This one, the X-Fold, manufactured in California, claims to be able to stay in the air with a heavy LiDAR system up to 55 pounds, which is the law, for over 6 hours. And that's what we're trying to do between Grand Forks and Fargo right now with the HubNet, is fly beyond visual line of sight on a daily basis with that very aircraft, with UND and with the test site. And the MFD is almost a blatant knockoff, an American-made knockoff of DJI, and it's the first truly reliable American-built with similar capabilities. And we use this for LiDAR all the time. This is LiDAR, okay? So light detection and ranging. It was once a portmanteau for the two words of light and radar. You could think of it as like a dolphin with echolocation, except it uses lasers, and it gets survey-grade accuracy. Okay? And when you're using it and you put it on course lock mode, it no longer becomes a drone. Here's the lexicon again. It becomes a rover. The drone with a LiDAR in autopilot is then therefore called a rover. And legally speaking, as of the 29th of August of 2016, you don't have to have a number 2 with you. You can fly a drone on your own. From the business standpoint, and from whatever other theme of this conference you might want to think about on this, it's better to have a second person for duty day, or having them as the visual observer, or having them as the mission commander, or having them as the sensor operator. And this is what you would see if you were the sensor operator flying a LiDAR mission with us. This is from Minn Kota Power, and you can see it's an interesting way to highlight the value of drones because it's a river crossing, okay? You wouldn't be able to get similar data to this if you're using a bucket truck. And you might not want to mobilize an entire helicopter if that's the only part as a remote location that you want to get instead of the entire corridor, okay? And then pilots or data processors will classify the point cloud based on the ground, based on the assets, the lines, and then the vegetation which needs to be managed and put into a GIS system as well, okay? So, and then this is where you get the artificial intelligence. This is also where we've got a vulnerability, okay? What if someone goes in and it's supposed to be declared a fault, and someone takes that fault detection away, and we don't have the positive that we want? There are false positives or missed positives. And then a branch falls on that because we missed it, we were hacked, and a blackout ensues. Fines ensue, lawsuits ensue, okay? And then, you know, it doesn't have to be just for the world of utilities, also in oil and gas with tanks. And there is an insatiable demand right now for artificial intelligence, particularly in the UAS world. This is what you would see with the real-time component identification. With our partners, when we fly, you can get this in real time, and then you can get the post-processed component, the fault detection after the component identification. So there is an insatiable desire for this, but this is also probably, at least in my opinion, the part of the UAS industry in which there are the most smoke and mirrors. So trying to tie UAS and AI together, okay? And this is out in the Bakken flying the optical gas imagers with a DJI aircraft. The optical gas imagers, not necessarily on the cyber side here, but are souped up thermal sensors, okay? So they should be able to detect fugitive emissions out in the Bakken better than just a normal FLIR sensor. And they can detect, 20 different hydrocarbons. There's no one in this room that I would put it past, just by seeing the audience right now, to get their pilot's license for a drone, okay? So still, it's $150, 60 questions, you take it from your armchair. And if there's one piece of advice that I would impart on anyone today, it's literally, if this is an interesting topic, to go and get that pilot's license before these regulations change, and they will, okay? So at some point, you're gonna be required to get a medical. At some point, you're gonna need to say what aircraft you are flying. And at some point, you're gonna need to do a check ride. None of that exists right now, and if you get it now, you could get grandfathered in without having to do all that, for better or for worse, okay? Aircraft, again, they have to be under 55 pounds. Recently, it was called registermyuas.faa.gov. Now it's just the FAA drone zone.faa.gov. And recently also, you have to register recreational aircraft, and you also have to register commercial aircraft, okay? And that is a critical infrastructure protection measure. Accountability, absolutely. This is what your remote pilot command would look like. I think everybody in here is over 16 years old. And you do have to get vetted by TSA, which I agree with. Everything will boil down to airspace knowledge. So skyvector.com is a good one. Getting a sectional. If you know airspace, you'll probably be able to pass the test and become a remote pilot in command. Again, you have to fly during the day until those regulations change. One thing that's very important to note is that our very own Xcel Energy is the most progressive-minded utility with critical infrastructure, and you can bet their IT teams are looking at the cybersecurity for UAS data. And they're finally flying beyond visual line of sight as of the September the 17th of 2018 at their convenience. And even just about 2 weeks ago, they got this new blanket waiver. Like, this is what everybody in the industry has been waiting for over half a decade, to fly their entire circuit beyond visual line of sight at their discretion. Not with reckless abandon, but at their convenience. And it's a precursor to, at some point, someone's gonna get a nationwide BVLOS permission. And it could be Xcel, not just for their 8-state circuit, but someone can just fly for whatever reason, say cinematography, anywhere, BVLOS, soon. And you can see from this precedent. So as far as the commercial sector goes, the key takeaway here is that so much of the future of the pilots, so much of the way in which the industry is going to continue to unfold depends on how the FAA is reactive and proactive. These are the people who hold the keys to the future of the world of UAS. Okay, but let's talk about the cool stuff, all right? So it was in 2003 that the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General Jumper, called a 3-star general, General David Deptula, into his office and said, ISR is a concept, okay? And you know ISR, and he had been teaching it, and I want you to become the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And Deptula said, I won't just be the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force, okay? I will be the Deputy Chief of Staff for ISR of the Air Force. Again, and that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And I like to think that the most important part of counter-UAS actually is counterintelligence. It all starts on the ground, and the prevention and the deterrence is the most important part of counter-UAS and counter-autonomy, okay? And this is the perception that we have to battle. So even with this $1,000 off the shelf, the drone is watching you. Privacy, capabilities that we don't necessarily want, and safety. What if a drone falls out of the sky onto someone, okay? We thank our lucky stars every day that an airliner hasn't been brought down yet. And when that happens, there is a potential existential threat that the FAA or the DOT will say, no more drones flying. Similarly to on September 11th, all aircraft grounded, bar none. That could very well happen. Or if a trade war escalates to the point of, like with Huawei, you may not bring Huawei into the United States now. Okay, those phones, at some point you may see NERC or FERC say you may not fly DJI, or you may see it come out from the White House. You may not fly Chinese or specifically DJI drones. That may happen. Huge impact. And it's not just commercial, it's not just DJI, it's also the Boeings and the Raytheons. It's the bigs as well, okay? And these are the bigs. This is what we've got, the big enchilada in Grand Forks Air Force Base. All global hawks report up through what was the 69th Reconnaissance Group and is now the 319th Operations Group. And I'm proud of this, personally, because I am the honorary commander of the 319th Operations Group. And all that means is that I get to say that every once in a while. So I can only get in trouble. But I want you to see also though, like, there are some sophisticated military UAS and other near-peer competitors in what is the great power competition. The Soaring Dragon out of China, that is a legitimate UAS. Let that sink in, okay? So, and it's UAS, counter-UAS can be UAS to UAS, big to big. It can be small to small. It can be neutralizing, it can be capturing, it can be hijacking, spoofing, detecting, or deterring. many different types of counter UAS, okay? And another thing that we have to battle is, this is called the Reaper, and this is called the Hellfire missile, right? It's difficult vocabulary to combat. And in North Dakota, we're charged with this, turning that public perception around. Okay, and I want to show you an interesting video that came out recently in 60 Minutes. Disclaimer, I do not own the rights to this video, okay? But it's really interesting. The swarm.
You've seen drones before, but never like this. A swarm of autonomous drones flying themselves. It's the start of a military revolution.
Now it's looking at me.
Machines operating on their own.
It recognized you instantly.
Using artificial intelligence to make decisions faster than humans and raising questions the Pentagon is only beginning to grapple with.
So if the machine's better, why not let it make the decision?
This goes to the ethics of the question of whether or not you allow a machine to take a human life without the intervention of a human.
So that was General Selva, also one of the founding fathers of ISR, was the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Other founding fathers, because when I think of ISR, I do think of Air Force first, okay? General Poss and General Rausch, and now General Clough, and all of whom have North Dakota literally and figuratively on their radar, okay? We also had the Chief of Staff of the Air Force come to Grand Forks, his 4th or 5th visit in 1 or 2 years, Secretary of the Air Force. So many eyes are on the Air Force culture that we have in North Dakota, particularly because of ISR, and we're a Northern Tier base in Minot as well, okay? And this is a well-documented launch from the International Center of Violent Extremism, okay? Now, I don't think that they actually have these capabilities anymore, but this is freaky to me, because this is called the Skywalker X8. It's about $1,000 off the shelf, and you can see right here on the sides, those are 1-pounders, okay? And they're so sneaky, they try to save the birds too. They will try to fly the aircraft, drop the payload, and then bring it back. And sometimes they're tracked that way. And the same thing with this. They will hover with 40 millimeter grenades with the DJI off the shelf. People here own DJIs, right? You can put a 40 millimeter on there, and you can use the stock off the shelf camera to give a live FPV feed with a footprint of some accuracy. This is what we're combating too. This is why counter-autonomy is a brave new world, okay? And this is what we'll do to counter it, all right? This is the Battelle drone defender that will hijack and force it to land. And this is the Skywall that will shoot a net with a CO2 canister and take a drone down, okay? This is one of my personal favorites is, in Scandinavia, they actually train eagles to take down smalls. And yesterday, you had an example of not necessarily using counter-autonomy or counter-UAS against a near-peer competitor or for a military action, but for what I would perceive as a police action or as a Customs and Border Protection action, okay? And this is a hijack method. This will hijack the drone. We'll go back to D-drone. You saw them in the landscape. It doesn't have to be hijacking. It can be the similar technologies that we're using to fly in aircraft with an equivalent level of safety as to visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight. And we're using that same technology to detect the aircraft. So D-drone flies over the has their equipment over the Super Bowl. So D-drone, and we have a partnership with D-drone at the University of North Dakota, will tell someone at, the police at the Super Bowl if a phantom, and they can detect a phantom. It's good. If it's approaching, say, the stadium, and you can bet there's measures to take that down. The last thing I want to say before I close is that if we don't have counter-autonomy, if we don't have the lead, and I say we have about a 10-year lead as far as bigs with ISR, we have a 10-year disadvantage as far as smalls on the commercial side, I think, with the rest of the world. But if we don't have counter-UAS, and one of the best ways to counter UAS is with a swarm of its own. If you have a swarm approaching, you have to conceptualize maybe the best way to attack it back is with a swarm. And if we don't have that, if we don't have counter UAS, we'll get another thing like what happened in Saudi Arabia recently, where half of the world's oil supply got shut down, regardless of who hit it. But this is an image that's been burned in my mind because this spiked oil prices up. And we're in the national center of energy excellence. Maybe just those words are in the incorrect order, but energy. We are in North Dakota directly affected by when drones hit critical infrastructure. And we don't have counter drones. We don't have counter autonomy. Our ISR wasn't correct, or our cybersecurity was incorrect. And with that, I would like to say it is absolutely a brave new world in the world of UAS, in the world of counter UAS. Thank you very much for participating in this discussion. Darren or whomever, if there is time to field any questions, I would be more than willing to do that now. Are there questions, sir?
So, are you legally allowed to perform counter-UAS? Did you bring a bird down? It's not sure.
Good question. So, as of right now, an unmanned aircraft, per the FAA's definition, is an aircraft. You can't spell unmanned aircraft without aircraft. If you point a laser pointer at an unmanned aircraft, it's as if you're pointing a laser pointer at an airliner. If you have a laser event, that is a federal offense. And furthermore, if you take down an aircraft and you're a civilian, so if I took down an aircraft, criminal penalties. If I took down an unmanned aircraft, it is no different than if I took down an aircraft. So the answer is, I may not. But on DoD facilities, they now, DoD-wide, have permission to shoot down anything that flies over their facilities. So the DoD may, and the FAA, not just taking away your pilot's license, may charge you criminally, and that wasn't always the case.
So where do you see the law going in that regard? For, like, let's say, utilities that want to protect their airspace over a generation?
Yeah, so I don't know if personally, I don't know if the utility would want the liability. That's some of the logic in why they outsource a lot of the complex missions. Counter UAS is complex, and if they miss something that they had internalized, like if they buy a D-drone sensor and they operate the D-drone themselves, right? Let's say XL Energy buys one of these, and they miss a drone. Do they hold D-drone liable, or are their members going to hold them liable, right? So I think that you'll see third-party vendors like D-drone become more prominent in the United States and have new permissions to operate. So this is just detecting, right? And it's a different story about hijacking, and it's a different story about actually destroying and eliminating, like this, okay? It's a brave new world, and I have absolutely no idea how that is gonna unfold as far as will civilians be able to destroy use counter UAS methodologies to destroy a perceived threat? Sir?
Does that go for drones that you own too? Like you can't shoot down your own drone?
Yeah, it's an aircraft. You cannot shoot down your own drone. And you cannot put a weapon on a drone either. So there are people who will try to strap a pistol on a Phantom and make a servo mechanism that'll pull the trigger. The Chinese actually are using drones with flamethrowers to burn garbage that has been caught on high voltage critical infrastructure power lines. So they'll fly it up and there's a big, garbage caught on it, and they'll burn that down. And it is specifically not allowed in the United States.
So you literally can't shoot your own drone?
You may not shoot an aircraft. So now here's the caveat to that. Indoors, anything goes. Seriously. This is not navigable airspace. The FAA doesn't have jurisdiction here. You talk to your landlord, or it's your house, right? Your house is your castle. You can fly your drone indoors and shoot the heck out of that thing. True. It's. Yeah. Sure.
Yes, the cost, we're seeing cost savings with drones and electrical, so we really hear from the military aspect of it, but the cost savings, and what is it, thinking of a young person here in North Dakota who goes to UND to learn how to fly drones, what does it cost for a company to hire somebody per hour, let's say generally, to fly a drone, and there's cost savings?
Are we negotiating? So that is the quintessential question of this new industry. It's project by project. It's case by case, and that's you know, the I in ISR right there. The price points are big time intel, right? And I don't know. So are you in the utility world? No. Okay. We don't know whether to price on an hourly rate, on a daily rate, or, and it depends on which sensor you're using. It depends on if you've got new permissions. New waivers come at a premium, right? There are many different things, the overhead that goes into it. The spectrum of cost differences is too much to be able to answer that. However, I'll tell you, on the BVLOS data collection, it will ultimately be cheaper than manned aircraft. And on the line stringing, it's 1/3 the cost already, somewhat faster, and you don't get charged mobilization. So right off the bat, it's a minimum of $30,000 to pull a helicopter out of the hangar. You don't get charged that in the unmanned aircraft systems world. And to put it back in, and if there's a weather day, there's another 20,000. Are there any other questions? With that, I'd like to say thank you so very much for your attention. I wish you all the best for the rest of the conference, and have a great rest of your day as well.